everyone. I'm WABC Chief Meteorologist Lee Goldberg, and this is Wake Up Weather on ABC7NY and For Weather or Not, sponsored by TD Bank. Well, it's a pretty quiet week. It's definitely rocking chair weather for us with little subtle changes as we go through the week. Just how long can this amazing pattern last? We'll talk about that and whether or not. This dry stretch is also going to coincide with some nice warming as well. At the same time, we are hyper-focused on Francine. New tropical storm in the Gulf, likely to become a hurricane before landfall on the Louisiana coast. This coincides with the peak of hurricane season, which if you pick one date is September 10th. And it's actually been unusually quiet, especially when you think about the forecast calling for 25 or more named storms. And of course, we are not on pace for that. And we'll talk about that as well. Meanwhile, in terms of rainfall, we're gearing up for a prolonged dry stretch. The good news is we're in good shape with our water supply. For instance, our reservoirs are running about 3.5% above average capacity. We've had a fair amount of rain, but we are going to have an overall extended dry pattern. For the month of September, we have less than a quarter-inch of rain, and that's about 0.8 below average. But for the year, we have a bit of a surplus. But certainly the topsoil can get dry. Thankfully, it shouldn't stress out the trees at this point, where we're headed into what could be a brilliant foliage season, since we've had some nice diurnal ranges with some early season cool nights and warm days. We've had plenty of soil moisture in there, so we're doing pretty well. In terms of our week, super quiet, lots of sunshine and dry, and there'll be a gradual warm-up. It's not that temperatures will spike, but we will get into the 80s the second half of the week. The beaches with an onshore flow are likely to be in the 70s, but you definitely have some bonus beach weather. In terms of the tropics, well, Francine became the 6th named storm of the Atlantic hurricane season. It is unfortunately tracking toward the Louisiana coast with a landfall sometime later Wednesday, maybe even into Wednesday evening. More on that in a moment. The extended forecast. There is no rain in sight. We've got a pattern that is locked in where we're just in a very quiet corner of the country here in the Northeast, and we have a warm-up brewing, and it looks like our second to last weekend of summer will actually feel the part and be quite summery. The humidity has been super low. Remember, we hit the upper 60s at best on Sunday. That was the coolest high temperature for a sub-70-degree day since the 18th of May. Cool nights as well. Well, that is coupled with very low humidity, refreshing air. And that's likely to stick around. There's actually a weak little cool front that has come through during the overnight that has just enhanced the dry air in place and will keep it here through the middle of the week. Those dew points will only creep up a little bit by Thursday and Friday into the 50s, and then ultimately you'll start to notice more humidity over the weekend when the dew points are in the lower 60s. Speaking of lower 60s, that's where we're headed for temperatures tonight in New York City, 62, 50s in most suburbs. With a front coming through during the overnight, we saw some isolated showers, but the air too dry for anything widespread. But if you wake up, you see any residual cloudiness, that's because of that front that has rolled through. It'll be a mostly sunny Tuesday and temperatures in the mid and upper 70s with low humidity. Just a delightful day and the definition of pleasant. Tomorrow night, a couple of patchy clouds, otherwise temperatures dropping back into the 50s, some 40s, well off to the north and west. And a beautiful day on Wednesday, which is, of course, 9/11. So at ground zero, early morning hours, low, perhaps middle 60s, maybe going to 70 as we go through the late morning hours, but very comfortable for the remembrances, the reading of the names, any ceremony across the area. It's going to be high and dry and very reminiscent, actually, of the weather that we had on 9/11-2001. So our weather map has high pressure dominating the Northeast here. As Wednesday, we will be watching Francine, likely as a Category 1, maybe a high-end Cat 1, approaching the Louisiana coast. It goes inland Wednesday, maybe even into Wednesday evening, and is probably still a tropical storm status for a time, working over Louisiana, parts of Mississippi and Arkansas and Tennessee as we go through the day on Thursday. Meanwhile, we are still sitting pretty here in the Northeast with high pressure offshore. There's also a front moving through the northern Rockies, but again, no impact on our weather. You go into Friday, and the remnants of Francine still bringing some soaking rain to the Tennessee Valley. Maybe even a couple of showers later in the day can sneak toward Chicago. There maybe will be a field of some high clouds, and maybe a few can blow off and come our way on Friday, but it still looks like a mostly sunny day and a warm day as well. The winds will be more east-southeast, so the beaches are likely to stay in the 70s, even though you'll see a forecast on the 7-day, which calls for 80-degree temperatures. And in general, our humidity is starting to increase, and more noticeably noticeable over the weekend, and the skies may not be as clean over the weekend as we've seen during the work week. We'll have a mixture of sunshine and clouds, but it looks like a really nice weekend overall, and you're still seeing some of the remnant showers over the Tennessee Valley and overall moisture down into the southeast, and a front just isn't able to move out of the northern Rockies. In fact, it moves north into Canada, more toward Hudson Bay. So when you look at it on the steering winds, it's clear why this is happening, because now we've got more Pacific air coming in here, the polar air staying to the north, and Francine comes on shore and everything kind of buckles up. The orientation on the jet stream is showing that Greek letter omega. We call it omega block in meteorology, and it's just a buckled up, slow moving weather pattern. So whatever weather you have in place, that's likely what you're going to see for a while, and that's what we're looking at. So as the remnants of Francine basically just rains itself out, we just sit under high pressure. The first changes that we're likely to see is when a deep trough or dip in the jet stream out west starts to move the pattern along. And that may actually lead to even warmer temperatures for us as we go through the long range. And you'll see that in the climate prediction temperature trend in the long range beyond the 7-day AccuWeather forecast. By the way, something else we're noticing is there another system out there in the tropical Atlantic when we talk about late next week? We'll get into that in a moment. But there's the Climate Prediction Center. When you look at beyond the 7-day, the September 16th to the 22nd, a below normal signal out west. So they're at least getting some relief from all the heat they've experienced, and we're getting above normal temperatures as we go through the second half of the month, or start the second half of the month. And you can see it as we go through this weekend, our temperatures in the 80s, and they back off to around 80 degrees. But again, the deeper you go out in computer models in terms of the extended forecast, it sort of trends toward what we call climatology, or the average temperatures. And I think in the end, it'll probably be a little higher than what's depicted there. So we could have a long stretch in the 80s. And in terms of precipitation, just looks like near to maybe even slightly below normal temperatures. Overall precipitation chances as we go into the weekend, after we get past that little shower threat that we had on Monday night, we're looking at little to no chance of rainfall right through the weekend. I really don't see any significant threat into the middle of next week, so an extended dry stretch. Getting into Francine, which has shown some really healthy strengthening as it's gone through Sunday into Monday, and now as we watch this storm go through the warm waters of the Western Gulf, it's likely to gain hurricane status and make a landfall sometime on Wednesday. It might be a little later in the day, but it's on the Louisiana coast, and again, it depends on where it actually makes landfall. It's going to be west of New Orleans and Morgan City, maybe toward Marsh Island, and then go up not too far from Lafayette. And by the time we get into Thursday, it's working its way through Mississippi, transitioning from a tropical storm to either depression and then maybe just a non-tropical low as we go into the Midwest by later in the week. There are two other systems that we're watching, and that's out in the Atlantic. You've got a couple that are in the central Atlantic and eastern Atlantic with a 60 and 70% chance of developing respectively, but this is really several days out from seeing any development, but something we'll watch. The next name on the hurricane list would be Gordon. By the way, if you're wondering about impacts to the Louisiana coast, the storm surge could be as high as 5 to 10 feet, maybe closer to 4 to 7 feet toward the New Orleans area, and about 4 to 8 inches of rain locally. Some amounts could get close to a foot. So there are those chances of those systems that we'll watch. And if you remembered in the steering winds when I talked about next Wednesday or Thursday, there was a storm swimming around the central Atlantic, kind of doing laps there. So we'll see if that comes to fruition. Here's what it looks like on some of the computer modeling where you see the storm going into Louisiana on Wednesday. Couple of waves out in the tropical Atlantic, and then basically consolidated in one more formidable one over the weekend, and just doesn't have anywhere to go. It may just end up recurving just because the way the weather pattern and steering winds are coming off of North America. Our beach forecast, because we're going to hold the sea and sand forecast. Given the overall forecast this week, why not? A westerly wind 5 to 10 miles an hour, 1 to 3 foot waves on Tuesday, water temperatures around 70, and the rip current risk will be low. Weather wellness, air quality's good. Pollen count on the medium side as ragweed season continues, and the UV index will be at the high range. 62 degrees, 7 in the morning on your Tuesday. It's mostly clear and comfortable. Most of our suburbs are in the 50s. Picture perfect. It's 78 for your high on Tuesday, lots of sunshine and low humidity. Catskills may get stuck in the upper 60s to around 70. Tomorrow night down to 63, mainly clear and comfortable. Here's your 7-day AccuWeather forecast. So we're looking at just Pleasant and perfect on Tuesday. At 9/11, sunshine and dry. Again, at ground zero, it'll probably be in the mid-60s to maybe 70 by the time we get to late morning. Another high around 78. On Thursday, around 80 degrees, lots of sunshine. It will be 70s at the beaches. Friday, nice and warm, 82. And then a warm weekend in the middle 80s, partly sunny and warm. A familiar forecast on Sunday, and more of the same into early next week. Pretty incredible stuff. 7-day AccuWeather forecast. It's always available on ABC 7 NY. Thanks for listening to Weather or Not. We'll see you next time, rain or shine.